And in addition to that, these are some of the key objectives and takeaways that you will be actually taking away from this presentation today. Firstly, it will be assessing assessing your readiness level. Are you actually ready to do, government contracting work? In addition to that, how do you actually find and apply for these specific contracts? You're going to learn how to establish systems and processes. Furthermore, you're going to assess your company's health. By health, I mean your financial health, your operational health, your staff health, right? And lastly, managing your capacity. So these will be the key takeaways from today's lesson plan. So before we actually get into the capacity portion, we need to have a firm understanding of the government procurement process. What is government procurement? So as you can see on the screen, you have government procurement is the process by which the government, either local, state, or federal, uses taxpayer dollars to actually buy goods and services that it needs in order to actually do the work that it needs to do. And an example of that work would be things like road repair, buying school lunches or school uniforms, cleaning, building housing, it's part of the development process. If you happen to be a small business that actually works in one of these verticals, and you've been able to establish yourself, there's a very good chance that you might be able to provide some of your goods and services to either local government, state government, as well as the federal government. And I will actually show you exactly what platforms you could use to actually see what bids and what services are available for you to actually submit your RFPs to. Before moving on, do we have any questions based off the first 3 slides that I actually went over? All right, it doesn't look to be the case, and I will actually move on to the next slide. So one thing that you want to ask yourself before actually getting into the procurement process is these series of questions. What is the intent? What is the intent of becoming a government contractor? Quite simply, why do you want to actually get into bed with the government? Make sure that you have a rhyme and reason that is logical and that is actually feasible. Is my business prepared to dedicate time and resources to the application process? So the application process is very lengthy. In some cases, it actually might take you several days, lots of hours to be able to complete the application process. And also, you want to make sure that your writing is specific to what that application criteria entails. You want to make sure that you're using RFP language that they're asking of you. Furthermore, do you have the product or the services that the government already buys? And if that is the case, if the government already has a product or a service that you're offering, why would they want to buy from you? What makes you different from the person that they've already contracted for either a couple of months or a couple of years? You need to be able to answer that before making the decision to seek out RFPs or any type of government bids. Continuing down the line, can you actually access the working capital to buy the tools that you need for the job? Meaning, do you have a line of funding that is available to you that is easily accessible in case you actually need to tap into that financial resource to help you either start the job or finish the job, right? So you want to make sure that you take these key points into consideration, because there are a lot of things that will happen during the process, and you will not have much control over what some of these things are. So you want to make sure that you're prepared, better yet, you're financially prepared to actually address these issues as they occur. And lastly, do I have a strong enough team / workforce to fulfill the contractual needs, right? Do you have the right people in place? Do they have the right qualifications? So on and so forth. So if you're able to answer all of these questions positively, then there's a very good chance that your business is actually ready to submit, some bid offers. All right, so moving on to the next slide here. So why seek government contracts? With an annual contract, and this is actually the first paragraph is talking about the federal and not the local government. With an annual contracted marketplace between $350 billion and $500 billion, the U.S. Federal Reserve is the world's largest buyer of products and services. Ignoring the contracting opportunities available through the federal government means effectively writing off the single largest avenue for finding new customers, right? They have such an extensive budget that not actually considering that as a source of revenue for your business, especially if you've answered let's say the first series of questions that I actually listed before, and you feel as though, yes, I can actually provide the services that government is looking for, then you should by all means consider actually seeking out government contracts. So perhaps you may not want to do government services on a federal level. Perhaps you're thinking to yourself, I'm probably much better off providing services on a local or federal level. So if you actually take a look at the second paragraph below, this is specific to the city of Boston and the city of Boston only, and it's relevant as of the last 5 years between 2017 and 2021. This was the latest data point that I was able to find. So the city of Boston, between 2017 and 2021, they spent $2.1 billion in contracts. Only 1.2% went to Black-owned business and Latino-owned businesses. And also in that group, you can actually include women as well, right? Because women actually, they do comprise a large portion of those two ethnic groups. The city is looking to grow these number of contracts held by Black-owned businesses as well as Latino-owned businesses. So when Michelle Wu, our mayor, sitting mayor, when she took over the mayor's office about 2 years ago, and this is a decree that went out I think about 6 months ago. This decree was actually issued. She petitioned to expand contracts for MWEs in the city of Boston, right? So meaning there is now a whole new avenue for which small minority, women-based, Latino-based, Black-owned based businesses can pursue, meaning their chances of actually acquiring government contracts on a local level has exponentially increased because there is a subset of contracts that are being set aside just for businesses who do actually fit under that minority category, being Black-owned business, woman-owned business, Latino business, and the also disadvantaged businesses. So let's say you're a person with some kind of physical challenge, right? You would actually fit into that criteria, into that bucket as well. So one thing that you want to keep in mind is that the government not only seeks out small businesses participation when it comes to buying products and services, it also goes to great lengths and spends lots of money in outreach programs to actually find good, qualified small businesses to be as suppliers. If that is you, then I highly recommend that you pursue some of these contractual opportunities that the government is putting out there for bids. For example, I'll give you one example. It will provide information, it will provide information to help you bid with minimal risk. In many cases, just by asking, you can actually find out the amount of, the amount that the government bought in previous years and what types of services that it actually bought and from whom, meaning they actually keep a track record, a list of every single vendor they've done business with, and that information is publicly available. So if you're interested, that is one way you can actually do some of your primary research to find out exactly these are the kind of contracts they've issued. These were the small businesses who service these contracts, and this is what the amount was for. This is all public record, or you can actually request this information from the government. Before moving to the next slide, do we have any questions from anyone? Okay, so moving on. Hopefully,
I did put a question in the chat, which is, what is the where is that information available? The contracts and have they been awarded?
Yeah, so I can actually send you that information. I'll post it to you. I'll post it later in the chat. But if you reach out to the Office of Economic, Boston's Office of Economic Development, they have the small business. It's the small business office, it's the small business section of the Office of Economic Development. And if you put in a request, then they should be able to actually answer. They should provide you with a link as to where that information is located, or they can send it to you in an email and let you know exactly who were past bidders, what was the amount for, and exactly what did that job entail.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to the next slide. And so this is in regards to the certifications that gives you a leg, that gives you a leg up in the process. So a lot of times, because these contracts are being put aside for minority businesses that are certified, the keyword is certified. The city of Boston does have its own certification process. So as well as the state of Massachusetts. And also there's a federal certification process. And each of these certification processes, they're done by different organizations. So if you are looking to actually acquire your MBE, your SDBE, which is a small disadvantaged business, your WOSB, there's so many acronyms, your economically disadvantaged business, and your veterans owned business, you can actually do it through 3 different organizations. The first of which is the city of Boston. They have a certification process that is specific to doing business with the city of Boston, and it only actually limits you to be considered as a minority enterprise only within city limits. And then if you're looking to actually work at a much broader level, something a little bit more, you want to scale beyond the city level, then you can actually do your certification with the SDO, that is the Supply Diversity Office of Massachusetts, and they will actually provide you with a certification that allows you to do business with all of the towns in Boston, in Massachusetts. So Worcester, Boston, Malden, Quincy, Milton, you name it. Basically every town, every municipality in Massachusetts is covered under the SDO certification process. And if you want to actually take it even to a much bigger level, you can actually do a certification at a federal level, and you would just reach out to the SBA and just, you would apply for the SBA 8A application. And one organization that actually can help you with killing 3 birds with 1 stone is WeBank, WBENC, WeBank. If you do your certification, and if somebody can just put if I think my colleague Victoria can put a link for WeBank in the chat, there's WBENC. They will actually help you do your certification, and that if you go through that organization, they will help you acquire both the certification for the city of Boston, the one that is also recognizable by the SDO as well, and also one that is recognizable on a federal level. So you're essentially saving yourself a lot of time by going through this one organization. But do keep in mind that this is a very lengthy process, and you want to make sure that before you actually go through this process, I'm just going to go back about 4 slides. So if you take a look at this slide here, which is have all of your paperwork done, ideally, you want to make sure that you are positioned to do so. You want to make sure you have your EIN number. You want to make sure that you've been incorporated as an LLC or as an S Corp, right? You want to make sure that you have your business's operational agreements. You want to make sure you have your articles of incorporation and also your certificate of good standing that is required. In column 2, you have other documents and paperwork that you need to have in place. So you want to make sure that you have your general liability insurance. You want to make sure you have your workers' compensation insurance. And also, if you're doing business at a state or federal level, you want to develop something known as a capability statement, which we'll actually get into we will go into detail with towards the later end of this presentation. Step 4 is, want to make sure you acquire your MBE, your SDB certifications. So usually when you're applying for these certification status, they will also make sure that you have all of the previously noted items on hand. So if you're just going to go through the certification process of being a minority enterprise, they will actually force you to have, they won't force you, but you will require having your EIN, your S Corp designation, and a few other things as well. And in the last column, you have something known as your UEI, unique, that is known as your unique employer ID number. And that is something that could be acquired through SAMS.gov. In addition to that, you want to make sure you have a DUNS number. There was once upon a time, the DUNS number was all that was required, but as of the last year, if you want to provide services to the government, you are also required to have something known as a UEI number, and SAMS.gov is where you will be you'll be going to actually create the profile for that number. And lastly, these are organizations that can actually help you with the process. The SDO, as I mentioned earlier, they actually help you with your getting your certification for the state, and PTAC, which is the basically think of PTAC as an online search query that sends information about government bids that have been released within either that are brand new, that are just being released, or that have been released over the last couple of weeks. What you can actually do by via PTAC is you can curate it to send you specific information related to your industry. It could be information that is above or below a certain bid amount, and also how fresh is the RFP the information regarding the RFP that they're sending to you. So those would be an example of making sure that you have all of your processes in place and all of your paperwork done before you actually move towards completing some of these RFPs that the government will be putting out. Let me go back to my the slide where I left off. So this is where we left off. So as you can see over to the right-hand side of the screen, this was an example of what I was talking about. Like, the city is actually putting a lot more, they're putting a lot more support into releasing, contracts that are specifically for minority businesses. The government not only seeks out small businesses to participate for the goods and services that it buys, but it also goes to great lengths in terms of spending a lot of money and outreach programs to find goods, to find from qualified small businesses. As I said before, this is something that you should consider doing because it comes at minimal risk for your business. The return on investment is definitely worth the time that you will be putting into the application process. So when you're actually seeking these government opportunities, these bids, these solicitations, this is what you're expected to deal with. So we have RFQs, RFPs, and IFBs. And starting with the very bottom, an IFB is an invitation for a bid. So think of this as a contract that is usually awarded to the lowest bidder, determined by somebody who is determined to be responsive and responsible by the contract and offer. So the amount of work that is required for you to actually complete your IFB, your invitation for information for bid, is not on the same level as it is with an RFP, which is often used to communicate government requirements to prospective contractors and solicit proposals. The RFP will be described by the government's requirements, anticipated terms and conditions, information required, and factors that they will use to evaluate your proposal. Meaning there is a lot of work that is required on your part in terms of providing a price sheet, writing the technical summary, perhaps even including a capability statement in your submission, your resume, a list of partners, and a few things as well, a personal statement sheet, and as well as that, right? So when you actually think of why do we have so many different types of, government service solicitations, oftentimes it's based on the size of the contract, it's based on the amount bid, right? In some cases, the government procures products and services by the following guidelines. And this guideline is specific to federal and not local. Local may actually do things slightly differently. So if you're using SAMS.gov and you're looking for contracts to bid on, this is the criteria which they use. So if it's less than $3,500, it will most likely, if it's at $25,000 or above, the government may choose, in a lot of cases, to buy through negotiations such as an RFP or an RFQ, right? So if the amount is more than 25K, most likely the kind of solicitation that they're going to put out there, is through either an RFP or an RFQ. And if you're somebody who's not comfortable with the writing process, or you're having a hard time understanding the language of the application, you can always hire someone to complete the application for you. All you would need to do is provide them the information they need about your business, your website, your history, your goods and services, your marketing strategy, your unique value proposition, and what makes you special. All right, moving on to the next slide. So these are some of the do's and don'ts of government contracting. One thing for sure is that you do not want to owe any back taxes. So a lot of us, if you owe, let's say $50 or $200 or $5,000, you want to make sure that you pay your taxes, because that will weigh into the decision-making process. You want to make sure that you fully understand the solicitation and the governing regulations of the bid that is actually being issued. You want to make sure that you do not submit an incomplete or a late submission, because they're very keen when it comes to submitting things on time. So if I were you, I would not take the chance and submit something late, unless of course there was a technical error that happened via the portal that you're using to send the information out. But if that's not the case, be very mindful of getting paperwork turned in on the time that they've allotted you. Furthermore, not providing specificity or focus, highlighting too much fluff and not enough substance. One thing that you don't want to be is, it's okay to actually be articulate, but you don't want to be too verbose. You want to make sure that you're getting your point across without a lot of fluff, because oftentimes that will just get lost in the ether and people will not have a lot of interest. You want to make sure that if you not understanding the best value considerations, unrealistic pricing, meaning because you're probably thinking to yourself, well, it's the government, they have a huge they've got a huge bag and they'll probably be able to afford, whatever price point I throw out there. That is not the case. So what you would want to do in your case is probably talk to other vendors who have actually provided government services in the past and see exactly what kind of price point was accepted for their goods and services, and that will give you a realistic pricing. You don't want to perhaps like say my services and goods, they cost $1,000 per hour or something ridiculous. Also, you want to make sure that you check for any errors in your submission. So now that you've been convinced of the value of government contracts for small businesses, let's talk about how to start with just the government contracting process. At this point, you may have assumed that a few steps are involved with qualifying you to serve as a contracted vendor for the U.S. government, and one of which would be registering your name, your business, creating a profile on sam.gov, which is also known as the System for Award Management, sam.gov. So that is where you would actually go to learn about what federal opportunities are there for you to bid on when it comes to government contracting. Some things that you want to understand is the pre-solicitation process. It's comprised of 5 different steps. You've got pre-solicitation, solicitation, evaluation, award, administration / implementation. With the pre-solicitation, that is nothing more than perhaps you having to attend a video conference, a Zoom call, telephone call, in-person workshop. And in a lot of cases with pre-solicitation, you have to go to those meetings to be considered for the bid. In a lot of cases, it is required, even though it is a Zoom meeting or it is an in-person meeting, there are a lot of government agencies that actually require for you to be a part of that initial experience before sending in your solicitation, which is stage number 2. This is basically the RFQ, the RFP, the IFB, and you going over, what the draft proposal looks like, so on and so forth. You creating your scope of work, your technical proposal, which we'll actually get into detail in a few more slides. And thirdly, we have evaluation. This is where they make the decision. This is where they will actually reach out to you via telephone, email, and ask you to submit additional information, if any. And stage 4 is the award. And in this stage, You want to be very, very careful, because oftentimes when it comes to government contracting, they in a lot of cases, they will not give you the total amount of the bid offer. What they will actually do is they'll either pay you in different installations, meaning they'll pay you per quarter, biannually, per year, per month, per week. It might have been a 10 million. Let's say you want a $1 million contract. That $1 million might be actually divided over the course of 2 years or over the course of a year. So meaning you will have predictive cash flow coming into the business at $100,000 a year for a $1 million contract. But is that enough to actually keep, is that enough money that you will be paid in the first month and to cover the tools, the personnel, having, certain systems and processes in place to be able to effectively execute that contract? So this is something that we're going to get into later on when we talk about building your operational business capacity to be able to deal with these jobs and make sure that you're the right fit, given, how you've been able to grow and scale the business and what resources you have in place. So how to register for bids? I mentioned local, federal, and you have a local, state, and federal. So if you're looking to actually provide local services, you're going to go to the City of Boston's procurement portal. The reason as to why I did not have a link on the slide is because it's a very lengthy web URL. So if you actually go to Google and you type in City of Boston procurement portal, it will give you an exact link to where, and I'll have my colleague Victoria actually paste the link in the chat for those of you who are actually interested. So what you will do is you will create a profile. The profile will probably take you a few hours to complete, but make sure you have all of your paperwork because it is a very paperwork intensive process. If you're looking to provide services to the state of Massachusetts, you would actually have a greater percentage of chance in making sure that you have your MBE, your DBE, your WBE in place before reaching out to the state and providing services. But if you have either one of those certifications, or you don't think you need it and you just want to shoot your shot, then where you're going to actually find where those opportunities and services are listed is on a website known as Combis. And if you actually just go to Google, type in combis.com, it will actually bring you to that exact URL. And from there, just like the very first step, you will create a profile, and then you can begin to see exactly what bid opportunities are available. And on any given week, any given day, there's at least 100 to 1,000 different bids, because again, this is for the entire state of Massachusetts. We're talking about Holyoke, we're talking about Springfield, Worcester, Framingham, Leominster, Boston, Cambridge, you name it. These are different organizations that have actually partnered with the government in terms of seeking out bid services and looking for people who can actually execute on their needs when it comes to their business needs. And thirdly, you're going to create a profile with PTAC to just query search and receive the latest bid information, as I actually mentioned earlier. And the fourth step is if you're looking to actually provide goods and services on a federal level, the easiest place to do that, it's not the only place, but the easiest place for you to do that is creating a profile with sam.gov. And you will actually see exactly what it is that they require for you to have. Make sure you have whatever that is, and complete the process. And from there, you'll be able to see exactly, you can actually look at some of these opportunities, either federally or locally, down to a state level as well. So moving on to the very next slide. So earlier, I had mentioned something about having a capability statement. So when you think about your capability statement, you want to think about it in these terms, right? Essentially, it is a snapshot of your business at any particular point in time. If that sounds very much like an executive summary for a business plan, it serves as a resume for your business. It's concise marketing tools that you have available for you to use, your qualifications, your experiences, what makes you different, the number of personnels, have you actually provided services to other governments, perhaps in other states, in other countries, non-government agencies that you've actually provided services to, the number of certifications that you have that is specific to your industry. Now, when I say the number of certifications, I'm not talking about minority certifications. We're talking about certifications. So let's say what's a really good example? You work in tech, right? And you have all of the necessary certifications for that specific industry. That would be an example that you would put on your capability statement, highlighting that, okay, you know what? Yes, we are qualified. This is a snapshot of my business. And once they actually see that you fit, certain buckets, there is a higher chance that you will be considered for, executing on the RFP, for executing that RFP. Before moving on to the next slide, I just want to actually turn the floor over to all the participants and ask, are there any questions concerning the capability statement? So one thing that I would like for everyone to keep in mind is that a lot of the things that I've actually mentioned, we do have, through SBS, we do have consultants and experienced professionals who would be able to help you with that process. So let's say you've actually begun the process trying to open an account with either SAMS.gov or with the SDO Supply Diversity Office of Massachusetts, and you feel that you're stuck because perhaps the language is unfamiliar or you don't know exactly what you need to have in place, you can reach out to some of the consultants that we have with SBS, Small Business Strong, and I'll have my colleague Victoria put that link in the chat for those of you who actually do want to pursue this course, but you're not too sure exactly where to start. We do have experienced professionals on deck who can actually provide you with additional information and help you get that process started. So do keep that in mind. If just, make sure that you utilize SBS to help you just get this process off the ground. So one key thing that is required for every single RFP and almost every single bid is a technical proposal. And this is where the writing comes into play, right? Because you're going to have to spend a lot of time writing your technical proposal. And ideally, when you're writing your technical proposal, these are some of the things that you want to have in there. You want to make sure that your technical proposal, it highlights your history. It includes past performances to show that you've completed similar projects. You want to emphasize project management. Essentially, you're going to create a high-level sketch of how that project will be managed. Then you're going to drill it down. You're going to be very granular about specific tasks, timelines, and deliverables. Now, again, keep in mind. This may not be your area of expertise. This may not be your forte. You may not feel too comfortable doing this. You can actually hire someone to help you with this process. So even with the technical proposal, if you're able to put together a draft summary, you can reach out to, TA organizations, SBS being a case example, and then say, hey, you know what? Well, I have a draft summary of what my technical proposal look like. Can you help me get it to a certain standard, to something that the government would actually consider, because it is professionally written and you've actually hit all of the marks that you need to. You want to highlight the team's strengths, by which you will be developing a team that has the experience to meet the requirements. This might require you to develop a strategic alliance or work with a bid partner. And to just dive into that just a little bit more, a lot of times you may not be ready to take on an opportunity, but there are opportunities for you to go in with a partner or as a subcontractor, especially with some of these larger bids. So let's say there's a bid for $1 million or $500,000 or $250,000, but you don't have the resources in place to be able to execute, the bid requirements. Let's say somebody else does. It could be a competition. Let's say they have more resources than you do. They have better staffing. They have more access to capital, but you have the information. You've got the passion, and you're the one who actually came to the table with the deal. You can actually work out an arrangement with a partner or with a contractor, and you have them be the lead contractor for that bid, and then you would become the subcontractor. What that would actually allow you to do is to gain the necessary experience and also to see exactly how that process is done at a very high level. Meaning, even though this might be your first time providing services to the government, you're doing so as a subcontractor. So you're essentially getting the exposure and the experience that you need. And perhaps next year, or perhaps in year 2, year 3, once you're very comfortable with what that process looks like, you can actually, perhaps once you've grown your team and you have more access to capital, you have a lot more tools and equipment by that time, you can then actually apply on your own. But in the meantime, do consider having a partner, and do consider going in on some of these bids as a subcontractor. Now, there is a lot of detail that is involved in finding a subcontractor, and we do have another class, we do have another workshop that following this one that actually will dig into the details of being a subcontractor, and you can see exactly what that looks up, what that process looks like for those of you that are interested. And on the next slide, so in the background, because this is intellectual property that is owned by my firm, Gustavo Consulting Group, in the background that is darkly highlighted is an example of a technical proposal that I wrote for a consulting opportunity for the city of Boston. So this is an example of a comprehensive and detailed document written and submitted for a multi-year consulting contract with the city. The proposal offers an in-depth overview of the services that I provide, the objectives, the methodology that I'm going to use, the key learnings, and also the expected outcomes. So by providing a detailed explanation of the proposed services, the proposal, what it does is it actually helps the city of Boston understand how consulting services, how my consulting services can actually be applied to meet their specific needs. So if you look at, well, it's not here, but the objectives that are outlined in the proposal, it provides, or your objective, it should provide a clear understanding of what your services aim to achieve, and how it will actually benefit that local government. And in my case, that was the city of Boston. Secondly, looking at methodology. So with me, when I actually did this, the methodology discussed in the proposal outlines the process by which services will be provided, including the tools and techniques that will be used to achieve some of these objectives. Moving on to the key learnings. The key learnings discussed in the proposal provided insight to the potential benefits that the city can expect from, Gustavo Consulting Group. And finally, the outcomes, right? The outcomes helps to establish a very clear understanding of the expectations, and it provides a basis for measuring the success of consulting over time. So to you, this probably sounds like a foreign language. You're like, okay, buddy, I have no idea what it is that you're talking about. So this is where you can actually begin to either hire someone to work with you directly who does have the requisite experience, who has actually done this before, perhaps many times over, or you can reach out to SBS, and SBS will happily help you better understand what that process entails, and also probably provide you with someone who has the technical writing capability to help you get the contract turned into the local government. So some things that you want to consider. You want to list past, when you're writing your technical proposal, you want to list past experiences and performances of individuals. Ideally, as I said before, if you don't think this is something that you can do by yourself, you can always, if you don't have the resources, you can always consider teaming up with others, right? You want to make sure that you review your SOW, your statement of work. You want to make sure that you have the key experiences and skills that are required to be able to do so. So go into your past performance. So your past performance, it is information that is an indicator of your ability to perform the contract successfully. Now, although the government can actually evaluate your business with, well, in a lot of cases, they can actually evaluate a business that has no relevant, performance history. Most organizations do require that you do have this history to give you a chance. And you want to make sure that when you're working with either the state, the local, or in some cases, even private enterprise, because in some cases you will be bidding for non-governmental contracts as well, but the process will be very, very similar. You will have to put together the RFP. That is one thing you want to consider. So when I was going back to the example of actually team up with others, small businesses, in a lot of cases, they will team with other organizations that can actually provide the required past performance, or they can actually help you work with a larger prime contractor to pursue federal government opportunities. And I will use an example of myself. So back in 2020, this was perhaps the summer of going into the fall, I was a small consultancy, and I actually came on board as a subcontractor to the main contractor, who was I'm not going to give any names here, but the opportunity that they were seeking, the services that they were providing to the city of Boston, was helping their internal team actually assess and evaluate the impact of COVID on small businesses. And we were known as CERT, which is basically the COVID Equity Response Team. Now, because I had a very specific niche, a very specific area in terms of, you know, the kind of services that I offer, they saw value in me. And this was an example of them actually going through what was the evaluation and submission process. As I told you, there are 4 different stages in terms of there's, solicitation, and then if you submit your application, and if you're one of many organizations, or perhaps you're one of 2 of final candidates who have been considered, the government will actually reach out to you and say, hey, you need to actually include either more minorities on your team, more women, you need to have more tools, you need to have XYZ. And in the case of this particular group, they actually needed somebody with my background and with my background and talent to be able to move on to the next stage of the application process, or for them to be considered for that final, for the final run. So they went back to the drawing board, they brought me on board, and they were able to actually meet that criteria. And I came on board as a subcontractor. And oftentimes this is you being in the right channels and dealing with the right people to be able to actually put yourself in position to be considered for these types of opportunities. So that would be an example of, being a subcontractor and teaming up with others to make sure that that opportunity does happen. How to win. So when evaluating proposals, the government assesses each submission to determine which provides the best value. This decision is not based solely on the price quoted, but it also considers several factors, such as the proposer, that would be you in this case, your capability, your capacity, past performance, and your pricing, which is huge. And I actually, dove into that in a previous slide. The technical aspect of the proposal, they're often more important than the involving price. So meaning, if you're able to really drill down on how things will be done and what types of, what kind of outcomes you will be able to arrive at as a result of the systems and processes that you have in place, that might be a bigger weighing factor than the actual price itself. So ideally, one thing that you want to make sure that you have is people who can actually meet these objectives and whatever needs it is that you have, right? Moving down. So proposal evaluation is an assessment of the proposal and your ability to perform the prospective contract. So you want to keep that in mind. When creating a proposal, it is essential to focus on essential elements and avoid any type of irrelevant information. The government evaluates all proposals on the same non-price/cost factors, and these are the technical approach, your past performance, your management approach, your experience, and also quality control systems that you have in place. These are some of the key things that you want to hone in on and make sure that you're addressing each and every single one for you to be considered as one of the final candidates, and ideally to be that person who walks away with the contract at the end. Now, let's actually begin to dive into your business and also how you do things, right? You want to make sure that you're coming to the table with a very unique value proposition. Your unique value proposition should be concise. It is a concise message that describes the benefits that you offer. It is how you solve your customers' problems and what actually distinguishes you from your competitors. Knowing that sweet spot will help you develop a very, very strong, use of value, unique value proposition. Ultimately, what you want to do is your unique value proposition is the reason why people or why the government will choose you over others and why they will actually buy from you versus your competition. What we're going to do is we're going to continuing where I left off. So when you're thinking about your finances, you want to make sure that you're able to generate consistent cash flow per month. You want to make sure that you have access to a line of credit. You want to make sure that you have your quarterly and your annual expenses, meaning, you're working with a QuickBooks and you can actually spit out that information, whatever you need to. You want to make sure that your business is net income positive, meaning at the end of the year, once everything has been done and you open your books, you actually have positive something. You have either $1,000 left over in the business or you have $100,000 once all of your bills have actually been paid off. You want to make sure that you're properly managing your debts, and also you want to make sure that you understand the value of existing assets, meaning can you actually liquidate these assets if you need to, if you need additional cash flow, if you need additional cash, if that cash is not available through you from some of the previously mentioned institutions, such as either a credit union or a bank or whatever else, do you have anything that you can actually sell that you will get a decent money for? So with processes and systems, ideally, when you're thinking about the processes and the systems that you have in place, you want to make sure that you have really good quality insurance process that is in place. If you're somebody who's very comfortable using different types of software to manage your projects, you could use a CRM tool, and there are several different types of CRM tools out there. You just need to decide exactly if your organization is at the point where it could begin to utilize some of these CRM tools. You want to make sure that for your systems and processes, you're using SMART goals for your projects. But more importantly, you want to make sure that you're able to balance the workload against the project delivery expectations, meaning there's a deadline, there's an expectation in terms of what you have to deliver and what you need to do. Are you able to balance that workload with the systems and processes you currently have in place? If that is not the case, then you don't want to find yourself, pursuing these government contracts and not being able to deliver on what it is that you initially promised, because what it does is it puts you in a very, uncomfortable position whereby your company's or your business reputation could easily be ruined because of your inability to actually execute, because of your systems and your processes just cannot, meet the demand of the job. Labor. So looking at your organization, your workforce, total number of employees, right? Do we have enough people on the ground to be able to actually execute on this contract? In a lot of cases, if it's a service, right? Are you enough? So let's say you got a small contract for $50,000, right? Are you able to actually complete all of the requirements of that job by yourself? Or do you actually need to bring on board people who have the requisite skills or work experience to help you deliver on that, on that contract? And if so, how many do you actually need to bring on board? Is it 5 additional more? Is it 3 additional more? Or is it just one other person? You need to make that decision. With your labor, again, going further, the people that you're bringing on board, can they quickly learn? Are they adaptable? Can they pivot? Are they creative? Are they problem solvers? So you want to make sure that the people that you're bringing on board, they have all of these different types of qualities and attributes. There's someone who's, they're an employee that is, they're quick to learn and they're very quick to adapt, right? Not just that, but at what pace can you quickly onboard additional personnel to be able to execute the demands of the job? Meaning the job has a set deadline, and how quickly can you actually onboard additional people, vet them, teach them, right? Or hopefully they actually come with the requisite experience, and then just kind of like throw them, right into the demands of the job. So you want to make sure that you think about all of these different factors. Otherwise, you'll just find yourself not being able to actually meet the demands of the job, as I've previously stated. So you can actually use this model to assess exactly, do you have all of the key functions in place in your organization and your workforce, your systems and your processes, your tools, your equipment, and your financial health. That will let you know if you are actually ready to deliver on a lot of these government contracting jobs that are out there. So this is an example of a SWOT analysis, and a lot of you know what a SWOT analysis is. Think of a SWOT analysis as a framework that allows you to assess the capabilities of your business, from which you will be utilizing such things as, what are some of your internal strengths? What are some of your internal weaknesses? What are some external opportunities? And what are some external threats, right? So this is an example of a SWOT analysis that actually puts everything into perspective. Over to the left-hand side, so this is a very general SWOT analysis, and you can actually use the SWOT analysis for any business, any field, right? Over to the left, you have, okay, strong reputation, credibility, those are good things. Strengths, you have solid foundation for management and operational processes. You have a strong mission. You have a quality and dedicated workforce with a wide variety of expertise. What you actually want to do is you want to use your SWOT analysis in conjunction with the capacity assessment matrix that was created earlier. Those two things will give you a very clear picture to help you determine the readiness level of your organization to be able to perform these government contracts, to be able to deliver on these government contracts. Looking over to the right-hand side, you have your weaknesses. There are such things as talent management, inconsistent approach to customer experience, resource limitations, limited and inconsistent data maturity, so particularly with your particularly with your internal governance in terms of how you do things. So now this is a general SWOT analysis, but you're probably asking yourself, well, how does this apply to what I do for me if I'm looking to actually do business with the government? Well, let's look at a SWOT analysis that actually takes all of that into consideration, right? So this particular SWOT analysis is not so general. It is very specific to contracting with the government. And these are some questions that I would like for you to ask yourself when you're looking to pursue some of these contract opportunities. Our team comprises they're comprised of skilled professionals that are creative and technically competent, right? So hopefully we're going to do an exercise here. So this is an example that I press for time. I want to make sure that I go over all of the information that I have here. And we're just going to continue where we left off. So this is the example that was previously on the board, not the one that you just completed, but this was the one that I completed, right? And this is just a very general SWOT analysis for you as a business that is looking to actually do, looking to provide goods and services to the government. So definitely keep these points in mind as far as weaknesses are. Well, one is you want to make sure that as a weakness, you're not stretching your company workforce too thin because you have way too many projects. You want to make sure that you strengthen your lack of connections. It could be perhaps people, leaders who are in the community who you can use as leverage to actually get some of these contracts. You want to make sure that you are giving your workforce the skills that they need to be able to actually perform the duties related to the job And you can actually take a look at some of the other quadrants on your own time and see exactly what is it that I need to do to position myself for greater success once these contracts do come through. And from here, we will just move on to understanding the processes of project management. And you want to make sure that you're streamlining each and every aspect of the project management cycle, which is product, process, and personnel. And what you're looking at here is a comprehensive and process-oriented system, a project management system that could actually be very, very advantageous, helping you to enable fulfillment of these contractual obligations for a contract with the city of Boston or with the state. You want to make sure that you have a system in place just for the products. You want to make sure that you have a system in place to actually effectively deal with your personnel. You want to make sure that you have a system in place to actually streamline your processes as well. So what is product management? So you want to be able to define and differentiate your product uniqueness, right? So your product, including your brand and your image, is the most visible part of the business. And as such, it deserves most of your focus. It is often the most visible aspect of your company, and it demands a significant amount of time. Remember, the most visible part of any business is their product. Your product is what you're selling. So you want to make sure that you emphasize a lot of your time and energy into making sure that the product that you have in the marketplace or the service that you're offering is one that has positive imagery, or that is perceived as being something useful, something positive, and something that actually adds value to the customer base or to your client base. Process. You want to be able to make sure, for the purpose of government contracting, that you actually define and refine your process. And your process actually encompasses a broad range of activities that your company engages to actually accomplish that specific function. It doesn't really matter what the size is. Every company has some type of process in place. It could be from sales to marketing to accounting, HR, but it could also include some of the following, right? When it comes to process management, how do you deliver the service? How do you create your product? Do you have a process in place to help you create the product? And also, is it an efficient process? How do you make a sales presentation? That is part of your process management as well. How do you respond to emergency situations? Let's say there's something negative happening with the company, whereas there's a lot of bad PR that's being released regarding your enterprise. How do you manage that? How do you actually get information to customers? That is part of the process management cycle as well. And lastly, how do you actually keep track of supplies and inventory? Do you have a process that deals specifically with these different, responsibilities? Make sure that you're very process oriented and that you have defined and refined your processes again and again and again, to the point where a lot of this is things that are done via automation, or perhaps you have a system that's like so robust that the process will yield the result. And you'll have to rely a lot less on people and personnel, but more so on the process, because it is very robust and you have been able to define and refine the process to the point where you've ironed out all the kinks and just everything is streamlined. So you want to make sure that you become very process oriented. Continued. So these are some questions you want to ask when it comes to process management. How do we XYZ? When do we XYZ? So you're actually relating this specifically to your business. Why do you XYZ? And this goes back to what I said earlier in the slide before this. By streamlining these processes and outlining, the steps that are required of process management, your company can actually operate a lot more efficiently and effectively without relying on the personal involvement of key individuals. If your process is solid as can be, you'll actually rely a lot less on individuals and more so on the process. So an example of a really detailed process or oriented organization would be, well, I can't think of one on top of my head right now, but there are several. But again, a lot of large corporations, they actually have systems and processes in place that doesn't matter what person comes through the door, they are going to actually be trained and how that business performs certain duties. That is part of their process. And as a result of them being trained in that process, there is consistency across the board, meaning whenever you walk into a Target, right, everyone dresses the same. Everyone, wears the exact same outfit, right? They have the exact same ensemble. It's the red t-shirts and the khaki pants, right? That is part of the process. How you present yourself is a part of the process. The action, it promotes a more consistent approach to completing your task and also freeing up your time. And it actually allows for resources and other functions of the business to be addressed the way that they should be. And last but not least, over here, we have people management. You want to make sure that you're hiring and you are positioning people that are skilled. You want to put these people, in places that they can actually be the most effective. So the success of your business in meeting these obligations heavily depends on the quality of the people that is involved. Your business will likely struggle to deliver on some of these obligations if you don't have the right person in place. As a result, it is highly, highly advisable that you invest the time, the effort, and the resources into building a very capable workforce that will help you arrive at, at whatever desired outcome you have. When you take a look at what is involved in the people management process, these are all the people that fall under that people. It is your customers, it is the vendors, the suppliers, your advisors, the partners, and investors. When you think of people management, it's not necessarily all of those that you're just hiring or who actually make up your workforce, but it's every single person that is involved in the process. You have to learn to actually manage people, from customers, vendors, suppliers, advisors, so on and so forth. And one slide that you can actually take away with you is this last slide here, before we end the day. And you're going to actually answer this, on your own, whenever you have time, later today or next week. What skilled people will you hire? So think of the contract that you're going after and think about the personnel and the people that you're going to have in place to help you, meet, to help you satisfy those obligations. And then you're going to go back to your process, right? How do we XYZ for the purpose of this contract? When do we XYZ for the purpose of this contract? Why do we XYZ for the purpose of this contract? Being able to actually answer these will help you greatly. And lastly, you want to make sure that you define and refine your processes. Again, you look at your existing processes. Is it worth the time? Is it working? Does it need to be ironed out? Does it have too many kinks? What needs to be included? What needs to stay? And once you have all of these things in place, you can rest assured that there's a higher likelihood of you being considered to satisfy a lot of these government contract obligations that are out here for you to apply for. So with that said, I'm bringing this presentation to an end. My name is Jay Gustavo. If you would like to reach out to me, I am a business advisor with SBS. Definitely check out Small Business Strong and fill out one of the applications for you to get a meeting with us. And I would be more than happy to talk to you and help you, manage this entire process from beginning to end, as I have a little bit more experience than you do. I'm assuming for most of you, this is the first time, and this is probably like several go rounds for me. So I am somewhat familiar with the process, and I look forward to helping anyone who actually reaches out to me via SBS. So thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the presentation, into the